Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining. Welcome to the second session of Day 10 of IEEE Regional 8 Virtual SGP Congress. And here we have today with us Inji Borai. Thank you very much, Inji, for being here with us and sharing all your knowledge.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Inji is a senior managing consultant in Mastercard's advisory team and is also an ambassador of Lean Startup Co. in Egypt. Here, she also holds a Stanford and MIT degrees, and the floor is yours, Inji.
Thank you. So the presentation I wanted to take you through today has to do with assessing the quality of your business model, or if you've successfully selected the right mechanism for achieving the objectives for which you've set up this startup. I'm unfortunately having a tough time sharing my screen. Let's see.
Should be in the top of the picture.
Yeah, but he doesn't give me PowerPoint as an option, unfortunately.
Oh.
Just a second. I'm sorry. Let me restart my PowerPoint. I'm so sorry. Apologies
So
on behalf of technology.
it was working before, so
yeah. Let's see. There we are. Okay. So in order to start, so we're all on the same page, I want to take you through some of the lean startup principles or the guiding directives that we're going to use as a base today. So the first lean startup principle is the fact that entrepreneurs are everywhere. And this counters a very common myth that only specific people were born to be entrepreneurial, or that if you're only entrepreneurial if you quit your corporate job and decide to start your own startup. But actually, almost everybody could be an entrepreneur. Even those working in very large, well-established multinationals can become entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs within their organizations and push through innovation and new projects and new lines of business within the company they're in. The second rule we're going to agree on today is that we have to be very focused on using something called innovation accounting. The conventional metrics that you've been using to measure the progress of your startup or the KPIs that you've been tracking day in, day out are no longer enough. You now need to also track something called actionable metrics, which actually measure customer behavior or observe customer behavior. And this will be crucial to you being able to assess the quality of your innovation and whether the various prototypes or versions of your product or service that are coming out are actually hitting the milestones that you'd like to be hitting. The third principle has to do with validated learning. So the notion of lean startup is all about the build, measure, and learn feedback loop. So all the time we're building new iterations, new features, new lines of business, new facets of this product or service. We're launching it out there. We're measuring the impact on our clientele and our customers. We're actually measuring how they're using it, how much time it's taking them, what's our churn rate, what's the adoption rate. And we're learning from all of this, and it's validated learning. It's not learning based on focus groups. So you could very easily have a survey and ask clients what they want, and you would be asking hypothetical questions, and you would be getting hypothetical answers. Whereby validated learning is actually based on selling behavior. So the customer is not giving you their opinion, they're giving you their money. So that actually counts for so much more. So the fundamental premise we're going to be using repeatedly today is the build, measure, learn cycle. Now, we need to check 4 key things. One, that the problem we're addressing is a meaningful one. If you look at all the startups that fail around you, you'll notice that a large part of their failure, people will attribute it to product market fit. But actually, there are 3 other very important fits that come before product market fit that get so poorly overlooked. And the first one is, am I actually solving a real problem? Does that problem exist? Is it a meaningful problem? And are there people out there who are willing to pay to have this problem go away? So that's like attribute number 1 that we really should be looking at. Once we've established that there is a problem, then does the solution we've chosen fix all of or part of this problem? So we're looking at solution problem fit. And then once you've come up with a solution, which is like a philosophy or a direction to what you want to do, the actual product that you've delivered, does it deliver this solution effectively? Does it do what you intended for it to do? And finally, the product market fit that everybody talks about all the time. Is this the right market for this product? Is our business model sustainable? Will we be able to sell this endlessly or not? So in order to do so, you have to be very explicit about your assumptions. Each of the previous questions cannot be based on what you think is the truth. It has to be based on market validated learning. So in order to do so, we're going to run through 4 hurdles. The first one is to establish that this is a real problem. The second one is to figure out if this is a plausible solution for this problem. The third one is to figure out if I can come up with a product that actually does deliver on this solution. And finally, can I launch it in the correct market? If you've read Crossing the Chasm, he speaks a lot about the adoption cycle of new products or new technology. So it's very important here to figure out what's the right market to launch my product into for it to have the best possible chance of success. Because once you have those early adopters, they will drive further adopter. You want their referrals, their reviews, their credential to be able to say, I sold this product to X company or Y company or to this group of humans. So in order to do that, you need to, step one, actually write down what your assumptions are. Like explore your assumptions to be able to figure out what is it that I'm trying to test through this building or through this version of the product or the service. And then you need to articulate those assumptions into a quick and cheap prototype. I need to go to market as fast as possible. And a prototype is not a fully functioning website. It's a group of screens just as images that someone can click through on their phone to give you feedback on their customer experience. It could be a flow chart or of how a specific algorithm is going to work. For example, when Starbucks first started their mobile ordering system, the way it worked was you would order online. Someone from from the Starbucks office would write down your order. They would run to the closest Starbucks to you. They would stand in line, make the order. So by the time you got there, he was ready to hand you your order. So it was completely manual, but they wanted to validate the assumption that people would actually use this service. So in measurement, it's about experimentation. And I'm happy here that I'm talking to a lot of scientists and engineers because you're really good at experimentation, coming up with a very valid hypothesis, designing an experiment, having a control group, and actually validating your assumptions or refuting these assumptions, scrapping it, and starting over. And that gives us one of 2 directions. So if you look at the right of the slide, by the time you learn from the market, you have one of 2 things you could do based on their feedback. Either persevere, figure out that, yes, I'm in the right direction. I should work on further fine tuning this solution and these features. Or I need to pivot. I'm going about this completely wrong. That's not what my customer needs at the moment. And pivoting can be changing fundamentally what the product does, or it can be changing how it does it. So you need to be constantly building, measuring, and learning. So a pivot here is a change in strategy without a change in vision. And Eric Rice is very clear on this, that pivoting is not about completely dropping something and completely picking up something new. No, it's having the same end goal. This is the same problem that I'm trying to solve. So it could be hunger or poverty or renewable access to renewable energy or better farmers having a better ability to monitor their crops or people in remote areas doing ethnic handcrafts having better access to export markets. So the problem has to be fixed and clear, and you have to be super passionate about it. That's your vision. That's unwavering and unchanging. But what could change is your strategy that will get you there. And you do that by pivoting. So today, the tool I want you to go home and try it on your own startup or your own idea is the following. We're going to do 4 rounds of validation. We're going to validate the problem, that this is a real problem. We're going to validate the problem solution fit. We're going to validate the solution product fit. And finally, we're going to validate the product market fit. So how do we validate the problem? So if you do not know who your customer is, then you do not know what quality is, because quality means very fundamentally different things to different customers. So you cannot say that the problem is nobody's offering a quality product to this customer segment or to this market, because what you define as quality might not be what your client defines as quality. So here you have to look at your core assumptions. So what we need to do is go out there and ask questions, explore and learn. What is the problem that I'm trying to solve? Who is it that has that problem? How does that problem impact people's lives? How are people solving the problem now? Because if there is a workaround that has been universally accepted or that people have been doing for years, likelihood of them agreeing to adopt something new and learn something new is much more of an uphill climb than problems for which people have been unable to find good workarounds or widely accepted workarounds. So, for example, imagine how much easier it was for Apple to get people on board with the idea of a smartphone or an iPhone versus how long it took Amazon to convince readers to buy the Kindle. Because at the end of the day, the average reader really didn't see that he had a problem. I had to lug a lot of books around, but how bad can it be? I would buy books on arrival, or I would give away the ones I didn't want. The idea of 100 books, like in a small device, took a lot of time to prove to people that actually you might want this. Generally, it's a lot easier to sell a solution to a pain or to a fear than it is to sell people on the idea of greed or doing better. So if people are not doing miserably, incremental improvements to their well-being are much tougher problems to address than situations where people have fundamental problems that are giving them a really tough time. So how do we define that problem? We need to have a very clear idea of who our typical client is. So you need to have a character map or a persona or a customer profile. And then for that customer, you need to actually sketch a journey map. So in that journey map, you'd say from the moment that the customer feels he has a problem to the moment where this problem is handled. What goes through this? So for example, if I wanted to buy a laptop because I'm unhappy with the technology I have at home. So my customer journey basically looks like spending some time on CNET reading reviews, figuring out how much budget I have, scouting some of the local stores and some of the local online Amazon equivalents to figure out what the prices are, asking my friends if they've used the specific shortlisted set of laptops, probably physically going to the store and picking it up, if not picking it up online and having it shipped at home, and then figuring out how I'm going to get things installed. And then at a later stage, after sales. So if something goes wrong, who do I actually go to? That's a huge part of my customer journey. And throughout that customer journey, you need to run measured experiments. So you need to run interviews with customers on how they're using the product or what their pain area looks like, what their typical day is like, how's this customer journey map going, where are the bottlenecks, where are the areas where they're spending more time than they would like, where are the areas where they're spending more money than they would like, where are the areas that are really inconveniencing them, because these are the real problems that they're willing to pay to solve. So you have to be very clear on where your customer journey bottlenecks are. You could go out there and observe the customers standing in line, queuing at the bank, figuring out how you could make their life easier. You can co-create journey maps with them. You can log their diaries. So you can like map the context around them. So you have to have a very clear set of measured experiments in order to say, yes, I have a clear idea of what the problem is, or no, I'm still flying on assumptions. So when mapping the assumptions, I need to look at three different things from a customer perspective. Desirability. So is it desirable? Viability. Would it work? And feasibility. Can we execute on this in a way that's financially viable for us? So in order to figure out if they want this, I'm going to make sure you guys receive a copy of this slide deck. I want you to try and run this exercise on your own startups. Unfortunately, we're on a 30-minute timeline, so I don't want to like pause and run mini exercises. I would do that if we had the full day, but instead what I want you to do is actually try and run this on your own at home. Answer these surveys. So who are your target customers for the solutions? What problems do they want to solve? How are they solving it today? Why can't they solve it today? What's their desired outcome? What would be an ideal scenario for them? And what would get them to stop using their current solution? And this is such a fundamental question. What would get you to stop lugging around 6 books and buy a Kindle? And it varies from one customer to the other, but you need to have a better consensus of what the widest possible base of customers would actually say in answer to that question. And then, can we actually do this? So you're engineers. Is it doable? What's the technical challenges? What's the engineering challenges? Are there legal or regulatory risks? Maybe it's a brilliant idea, but it's not legal where you are. Like the e-payment companies in Egypt had to go for a good decade trying to convince the central bank that what they're doing is not actually promoting money laundering. So just to do something as close to PayPal or Venmo here. So you have to figure out what your hurdles are. Are there, do we have the right leadership team to support the solution? Will I be able to fund it? Do I have the right team on board? Like, am I working with the right people to make this happen? And then, should we do this? So, how am I going to get customers? How am I going to acquire customers? How will I get them to repeatedly use our solution, not be like a one-time thing? How will I get them to incentivize them to refer us to new customers? How does this solution feed into our larger vision? And who are the current competitors in this space? You might everything might be perfect, but you could be up against a Goliath in this space, and you really don't want to do that. And how will you generate revenue? So here, what you do with all your answers is sort of map the assumptions that you're working with. And some of them will be important, to which you have a clear answer. And for those, you can have very clear plans for how you're going to prototype or what kind of preliminary solution direction you want to go in. Others could be very important, but you know nothing about them. They evaluate. And for these, you need to actually seek further insights from the market and further information. And then there are less important assumptions. Those, if I know enough about them, I can defer making decisions about them. And if I don't know enough about them, I can, down the line, set up experiments in order to generate additional data. But you could always wait on everything happening in the lower 2 quadrants. Okay, so how do I decide if should I pivot or should I persevere? So the decision here is based on the results of the surveys. So based on the feedback that you've got, you're going to have one of two solutions. Either you pivot or you persevere. So for the purpose of today, I'm going to assume we're persevering. It's going well. So the next step is, let's figure out what the ideal solution is for this problem. So a solution that fixes at least part of the problem. Okay, so solution here is a direction. So it could be things like, if the problem I'm trying to solve is that energy has become very unaffordable to people in remote locations, so the solution can possibly be, figure out smart ways to extend the grid, or figure out smart ways to have alternative renewable energy solutions happening where they are. I could be looking at wind, I could be looking at solar. So that's like the general solution, the direction I'm looking at. So when I look at that solution, I need to figure out, does this solution actually work? Does it solve enough of the problem for it to be meaningful? Would people trust it enough to use it? And will they spend more time and effort to solve this problem or not? And at this stage, most startups would have been told by their investors or their mentors that this direction or this potential value proposition or this potential solution can actually be mapped into a business model canvas. You can start saying, yeah, okay, I have a general idea of what I want to do to solve this problem. So I'm going to do solar powered water heaters in those locations. So that's like my high level, what I'm going to be offering, and I'm going to do it at a competitive pricing. So you can start figuring out different aspects of your value proposition. Given that from the last phase, you're already more or less clear on your customers. And in this phase, you're trying to be more clear on what I'm going to offer them and how. So looking more at quadrants like key activities or key resources or strategic partnership. And here, it becomes even more important to dwell on the competition. So here, competitive analysis becomes crucial for us to figure out who else is doing what. Otherwise, it's almost impossible to come up with a good value proposition, because it'll become another Me Too product. it's very important to get a better understanding of the literature happening here. Surveys on who's attempted this before. So, and both are extremely valuable. Like talking to people who have done this and succeeded, and more so talking to people who have done this and failed. Because why understanding why they failed can save you that failure down the line. So in product development, the idea of a minimally viable product is an iterative process. So I all the time I'm coming up with an idea for a solution direction. I'm prototyping it. I'm testing this prototype in the market. I'm collecting data based on how the customer used it, and I'm analyzing and learning, and I'm coming up with the next MVP. Ideally, it's a very bare bones offering. So if you're sitting and you've had this idea for the startup for the last 3 years and you've been working on a platform that has yet to go live for the last 8 months, trying to get everything perfect, then you're doing it wrong. Because perfection here is your enemy. It doesn't matter if you think it's perfect. What matters is for the customer think it's perfect. What will they pay for? And I've had startups who were doing e-commerce platforms who literally did it using Facebook and WhatsApp and just having auctions on WhatsApp of the products to prove that people would pay for used electronics, for example, in this context, prior to putting a dime or an hour on the development of the website. So it's crucial for you to test that this solution that you have in mind actually fits the problem, solves the problem from the customer perspective. Otherwise, all the time and energy you put into this very first prototype is such a waste. Once again, we ask ourselves, should we pivot or should we persevere? So let's persevere some more. So let's assume that now we have a problem that we all agree this is our life mission, this is what we want to do, and we have a solution direction we want to work towards. Then we start looking at a product. And a lot of the times when people start with a product rather than start with a problem or start with a solution, a lot of the times when you talk to an investor, the first thing that he's going to tell you is, you're not a company, you're a product. I don't want to invest in a product. I want to invest in a company. So you need to have a general vision and problem that you're trying to solve and a solution direction that's going to flavor or taint the different kind of products that might come out of it. And this might be the first of a huge line of products that you actually deliver. So when coming up with a product, once again, I'm checking, is it more meaningful than what people are doing now? How usable is it? So at this point, we're looking at user interface and customer experience. And we're trying to work out the kinks of how easy is this product to use and to what extent, when using it, do customers feel that it's really addressed their original problems? You will notice that solutions or products that have had the slowest adoption curves were ones that necessitated huge behavioral change from the customer. So if you're asking the customer to do something counterintuitive to them or against what the norm in a massive kind of way, then it has to have a phenomenal product solution fit and a phenomenal solution problem fit for them to even entertain it. So if that's the case, you have to make sure that the upside to them is amazing. Otherwise, people will revert back to their old ways. Prototypes can be a very wide series of things. They can be a demo where you just click through some images. They can be sketches on a piece of paper, like flowcharts in a room with post-its on them. They can be very basic versions of the robots you're trying to build out of bits and pieces of other people's robots or other people's products. As long as it functions enough for people to be able to say, yes, I'm capable of using it, and yes, I'm happy with its output, then that's a viable prototype. And here, the crucial inputs for you in terms of measurement and experimentation is the design reviews, the usability test, the user interface tests, user experience testing, alpha and beta testing. Like here, this is crucial. If you're coming up with a product where user interface is the most important thing to you, then A/B testing becomes your best friend. You're constantly looking at different versions of the website or of the app that are going to two sets of people, a test group and a control group, to figure out which one resulted in faster times, people using the app more, better click-through rate if it's better purchase rate, them actually referring other people to the platform with their codes. So it's crucial for you to be able to test multiple multiple potential interfaces with the customer to be able to say, yes, that's the direction I want to go in. And once again, we'll ask ourselves, should we pivot or should we persevere? So let's persevere one more time. And then let's look at the classic product market fit. So is our business model sustainable? So for example, the example I like to give people all the time is if Philips wake up tomorrow and decide to invent the light bulb that never goes off, is that good for business? Short term, medium term, and long term. Yes, they might have amazing sales for the next year, but beyond that, they've actually cannibalized the market that they've been living on for the past 3-4 decades. So it doesn't make sense to actually come up with a product market fit that's bad for business. So here you have to think very strategically. So how big is the market? How big is the opportunity? So should I launch in Nigeria or Kenya or Dubai? Um, how many people have this problem? Do people trust our product to solve their problem? Will people give us money for this product? I mean, if you have a phenomenal product and people will only use it under free trial and they would never pay a dime, then you do not have a good product market fit, no matter how glorious the reviews are. Unless you're able to come up with a way to monetize on this solution, it's one you have to kill off. Because otherwise, you will fail to continue to deliver the solution. Your bleed rate as a company is going to be so high with no actionable revenue coming in. And there are very limited specific types of companies that can survive for that long with that kind of business model, just surviving on investment in the hope that eventually 10 years down the line, they would have grown enough in terms of user base for an IPO to make these investors profitable or for an exit sale of sorts. But let's talk about the scenario where you don't have that much cash with you at the moment. It's not like you have an investor at the door. So you need to come up with a way to ensure that your revenue sustains your operations. Here, you could it's the same mindset with regarding to the prototype and with regard to the experimentation. But here you're not testing generically, you're testing with very specific customer segments. I'm trying to figure out where the ideal place to launch is this product or this service. Some products you need to go nationwide from minute one for it to make any sense. And other products for your cost to make sense, no, you need to launch in a very tight piloted area that's very close together for your logistics cost to make sense. Sometimes you need to launch with a very elitist view where the product is invitation only and refers only. Other times, no, for it to be successful, you need to launch targeting the mass and trying to grow as fast as possible because it's a race. He who acquires more customers will stay and the competitor will die because the switching cost becomes too difficult. So everything based on crowdsourcing or knowledge crowdsourcing as a solution is literally a race for who can onboard more users, irrespective of whether or not these users are paying today. Once again, do I pivot or do I persevere? Okay, so I want to talk a little about pivots. We took the scenario where everything went brilliantly and I continued to persevere from one step to the next. But in reality, that's a very fairy tale solution that almost never happens. So what usually happens is you end up having to pivot. So there are like top 10 types of pivots that you can actually use, the most popular ones. The first one is a zoom in pivot. So a zoom in pivot basically says that if you are trying to address a huge solution or a huge product, no, let's zoom in on a specific feature, and that's the one we're gonna structure the product around. So here, Instagram is the most famous example. They started out with an app that does everything, and then realized, no, that's not working, and they kept like ditching features until they just stopped with, okay, let's stop at picture taking and picture sharing, and that's it. That's all we're gonna work on. The next one is a zoom out pivot, which is the complete opposite. Rather than just have one feature, it's about adding on more features and trying to offer a more holistic end-to-end solution. The third pivot is a customer segment pivot. It's about moving from one customer segment to another, figuring out, no, maybe I should not be talking to the moms anymore. Maybe that's not the customer I should be targeting. Maybe I should be speaking to the kids. So I'm pivoting my strategy or my product so that the user is actually the kid and not their mom. The other one is a customer need pivot. So I'm pivoting around the customer needs. So I'm figuring out if it's more about longer battery life or a more interactive screen or a sturdier phone. So I need to figure out how the need of the customer is evolving and sort of move around their need. The fifth pivot is a platform pivot. So it has to do with how I'm delivering the service. This is very similar to the channel pivot, which is number 9. So basically, here I'm looking at what's the interface between me and my customer. Am I delivering it to their doorstep? Is it being offered remotely? So is it e-learning? Or is it happening through a distributor or a third party? Is it co-bundled in a sense? So w- here I'm looking at how the how of the service rather than the what of the service. The same holds true for business architecture pivot. For business architecture, you're moving across the different business archetypes. So classically, there are 8 different business archetypes. You could be a service provider or a manufacturer or a marketplace or a platform. So I'm pivoting around that business architecture from, for example, a company that manufactures cars to a company that rents out cars to an Uber, for example. Number 7 is value capture pivot. I'm pivoting around how I'm creating value for that client. So I'm moving away from example, making them pay for subscriptions and instead having some sort of like freemium model where I'm actually making money off in-app purchases and advertising. The eighth one is an engine of growth pivot. So I'm pivoting around what is my driver for growth. So it could be going into new markets. No, or you pivot away from going into new markets. So it becomes, no, I'm going to focus on one market and I'm going to grow really fast in that market. Or it can be, no, I'm no longer going to grow my current operation. I'm actually going to acquire a competitor. So you pivot around your growth driver in a sense. The final pivot is a technology pivot, and you're engineers, so you're the experts here. It's about figuring out, am I using the right software for me and am I using the right technology for me? I'm going to stop here and I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much, Inji. That was really, really interesting for everyone that is seeing us right now. And we have a few questions for the audience.
Sure.
We can start with, in your opinion, what are the usual pitfalls for entrepreneurs and how could be they avoided?
Okay, so one of the top reasons why startups don't work or entrepreneurs fail is cash. So a lot of the times, the companies actually, if you look at the books, they're selling a lot and they're bringing in a ton of revenue, but it's the timing at which the revenue is coming in versus the huge bleed rate of the monthly cost going out. This cash squeeze is a huge issue, and it's why a lot of startups fail. So cash management is extremely important, and this is why I advise most startups that I mentor to get a good accountant on board as early as possible, even in a part-time capacity. Even if 5 of you decide to share an accountant that comes 1 day a week to each of you, that is totally worth it.
Mm-hmm. Because as you were mentioning for investors, you mentioned that it was only the product that was supposed to be pitched more than the team or the company itself.
Yeah, that's a lot of the issues that come about. So a lot of the time when you go to an investor to pitch, you're talking about the current product you're working on now. So you've come up with this really smart robot or this really smart piece of PVC, and that's all you want to talk about. But to an investor, they want to see beyond that. They want to see what your vision is. They're buying into a company. They're not buying a product. So they want to see what the next product is going to look like, how you're going to be able to upsell on this product. So they're interested in hearing more about your solution, your vision, your direction, why you're passionate about this problem and why you're trying to fix it. And of course the team is so crucial. Like if we're talking about pitfalls, one of the hugest pitfalls is assuming I could do it all myself. That
Mm-hmm.
is the most false statement on the planet. You need an exceptional team. Even if you do not want to have co-founders, you need an exceptional team.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and in this idea of investors and so on, we have another question that says, how do you gain financial support without losing your intellectual property, your ideas, when pitching to investors?
Okay. So it's important when you pitch to investors is to show them numbers that they care about. So if you think your intellectual property or the technology is the really precious part, then you do not need to delve into great details here. You can just say, I own a patent. That's important for them to know. But instead, what you want to focus on is numbers that actually mean something to them. So how fast have you been growing month on month in terms of sales? which companies did you test with that actually gave you good feedback about the product and gave you pre-orders. So like if you don't have a product out there, pre-orders are a lovely way to prove that this actually works. If you have statistical evidence from the test showing how good this solution is versus other solutions, showing that gives you a lot of value without giving away a lot of details on how you're doing it. So showcase impact rather than process.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then we have another question regarding the mentors and advisors that you were referring to. How or where would you recommend a recently launched company or a startup that hasn't been launched yet to look for these advisors and mentors? How to find them?
There's a few mentor networks out there. There's one called VC for Africa, which covers all of Africa. It's a network of mentors. And there are some informal mentor networks that usually are affiliated with different accelerators and incubators that are supporting startups. But I'd love to have a chat with Laura and Dalil maybe at a later point about having maybe a mentor network for IEEE.
Yeah, sure. We can talk about that later on. Okay, we have another question that talks about the metrics that you were mentioning for feedback from your product. How to ask for these metrics and feedback without looking unprofessional or immature.
Okay, so the key difference here is the following. The metric I'm saying is, have you ever been in a blind taste testing? So basically, they blindfold you and they give you miniature cups of the different sodas, and you try them and you give them feedback on which one you like the most. So the feedback here is a lot more honest than if he asked you hypothetically, he stopped you at the supermarket, is like, would you ever consider buying something other than Coca-Cola? So if you're a die-hard fan, you're gonna answer from a place of like loyalty and emotion. So no, I would never drink a Pepsi. But instead, if he's launching a new soda that's very like ethnic or country specific, like Brazil have a really good local soda, and by giving people a taste, that's a great metric of measuring impact. So a lot of the food people specifically, the way they do it is they give away free samples at different locations. So that's a way to measure the impact of the people. So if for a week we give away free samples, and then for the week after that we measured, did people come back and actually buy the product off the shelf or not, or come and ask about it, then that's a more valuable metric than if I ran a random survey of people of what flavor would you like in a specific product, for example.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay. Another question from Rita is asking, what's the risk when targeting a minor of population with a very costly product?
Okay, so if you're going super premium, super elite, and you're targeting a very small segment of the population with a very expensive product, usually what happens is this is usually the overserved market. So everybody wants to sell to this segment because this is a segment that has a lot of cash. So think of how many brands of designer bags can you think of, or premium vehicles, or uh, like designer watches. So the key challenge here is the strength of the competition. So you're fighting against people who have spent years and millions putting money into their marketing to cement their position with that target customer segment. So in order to penetrate that, the most successful strategies have been either offer something super unique and very different than what everybody else is doing, or endorsement, having somebody champion you. So for example, we have a local brand here in Egypt by a couple of girls who came up with their own line of leather bags, which is a super competitive industry. But they spent a lot of time and effort trying to get through to a specific set of A-listers. And ever since Beyonce wore their bag, their business model has dramatically changed. They've been enlisted at Harrods. They're able to sell in dollars. So by just having that one influencer in that sector say, yes, I endorse this, that automatically opens doors for you.
Okay, and now that you mentioned the marketing, we have another question that asks, what's the relation between engineering and marketing?
So there's no direct relationship between engineering and marketing, but at the end of the day, I could claim that all aspects of life require some level of engineering for you to be able to problem solve and work around it. And they require some level of marketing for you to be able to convince people of your point of view or your idea or your product. So it's always a shame when you have a phenomenal product that's not going to market sufficiently because it's under marketed or it's marketed incorrectly. So I think it's very important for the team that you're formulating to have complementary talents. So you can't all be amazing techies. because even if you have the world's best solution, you won't be able to sell it through. So you need to have someone who's really good at cash planning, for example, financial planning, and somebody else who's really good at pitching, who can get up there on stage and convince people that this is the best AI solution you have ever seen. And you need that dynamic, you need that complementarity. It's crucial for your success.
Okay, so we've been saying that in the team you need an accountant and someone that brings the marketing skills and also the pitching, and then the techie that we all have here in the engineering.
Definitely.
Okay, there's another question coming from an engineer. How important is to perfect a product that sells itself compared to investing in marketing strategy, given startup level funds and time?
Okay, so perfecting the product is a very slippery slope because you're perfecting it from your perspective of what the product should look like. So ideally, you should start with a basic version of that product and try and sell that and get feedback from the market on what they liked and what they didn't like. But at least that feedback is paid feedback. They actually bought the product at least once to be able to give you that feedback. And then work on improving the product some more and then relaunch it. And you notice most of the people in software do that. Like people in hardware are always very worried about doing that. But in software, just look at how frequently your phone updates your apps or your the iOS itself or the Android software itself. So it's so it happens so often in real life, but always from a startup, we come from a place of great perfectionist and dreaminess, where we want to have a perfect solution, the perfect product, and that would really drain your resources. Instead, you should be thinking about, what do I need to do to get money in the bank? So if I need to have a basic version of the product and then approach a key influencer and say, we want to test this product with you, for example, at your factory, and work with them on testing the product at their factory and constantly improving that until it's perfect. And then they can get that version for free and you get the credential. You can say, I sold to GE a solution that actually works and I've been testing it and improving it with them. And that credibility will allow you to sell this now optimized or perfect product to a much wider base of customers.
Okay, but what about in this situation where you try to sell first, even if it's not perfect for you as a startup co-founder or whatever? If there's a very small market, I guess that there's the risk that you have, a bad image from the beginning if people don't like enough your software or your product.
So one thing you could do is launch a basic version of the product and say the following, that once you buy this product, you will be eligible to 3 upgrades within this first year, and have them vote on which upgrades they want. Then you'll know what to invest your time in, because there could be some features you had planned that they really don't care about.
Okay, that's a very good tip. Thank you very much. All right, one of the few last questions we have here. How do you approach a customer complaint to make sure you also don't chase away a customer?
Okay, so the customer is always right. I know that's a very annoying statement, but unfortunately it's true. Even when they're uninformed and even when they could be in the wrong. But as much as you're concerned, the customer is always right. So step one is have really good customer service, because really good customer service is make it or break it. So if you don't have someone dedicated for the function and this customer is sufficiently upset, you as CEO, pick up the phone, call the customer, figure out why they're upset and how you can fix it. So the call is about making sure you'll fix it, making sure you understand exactly what it is that bothered them. So is it the product, or is it how you delivered the product, or is it the person who dealt with them before you? So it's crucial to have some sort of root cause analysis of why is this customer upset.
Nice. Thank you very much. They're also asking about the name of the network of Africa that you mentioned before.
It's called VC, which is Venture Capital for Africa. And it's a network of both entrepreneurs and mentors, and they hold sessions around the different cities in Africa to sort of match the entrepreneurs with the mentors. So you sign up to become one of their entrepreneurs, and they eventually assign you a mentor from the network.
Thank you very much. I think that's very useful for the people that are hearing us from Africa. And the last question that we have here in the chat today is, what's your opinion on the best way to involve or invite a partner to a business without one's business idea being stolen?
So finding a co-founder. Now, finding a co-founder is tricky. Um, I'm going to tell you based on my personal experience co-founding a startup that what it comes down to is don't pick someone who has don't pick someone just on skills. Also pick someone on values, because at the end of the day, you want someone where if you disagree, it doesn't become a legal battle and it doesn't become an issue where documentation gets stolen or where the product ID gets stolen. Always partner with people who are as ethical as you are and which you could always reach civil agreements with on your way in and on your way out. I think that's crucial when selecting a co-founder. And people often overlook that. They think, oh, I'm really good techie. I need a really good marketeer. He has had past experience in this sector. Then definitely let's sort of bounce in together and start a business. And doesn't really work that way. Always pick a co-founder on values.
So it's more on values and things aligned, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Inji, for this very interesting presentation and so practical. And I can't wait to put to use all these questions that you've put there. And thank you so much. It's been super interesting for everyone.
No, thank you all. I will be emailing Laura the presentation, and I'm sure IEEE will be sharing it with all of you.
Yep, we will distribute it later on. Thank you very much. Very interesting, Inji.
Okay, have a great day, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye bye.